Hello and welcome to the Ahaki podcast. My name is Solomon Serwansa, and it's always an honor having you listening as we really look at Afrocentric ideas on solving our everyday problems and challenges. Ahaki is an organization that really is looking at Afrocentrism or the Afrocentric ideology in promoting health and justice in Africa. And it's always an honor to host this podcast. In this series, we'll be really focusing on sexual reproductive health and rights through the eyes of Africans. We've hosted different giants on this show, and I'm hoping that you're learning a thing or two. Today, I'm privileged to be hosting Professor Ben Trinomcha. Professor Ben is a professor of laws at Makerere University. He's been a great teacher and described by many as Shokoro. He will be telling us as why they call him that name. Professor Ben has been teaching for the last 38 years. He comes on board with a great wealth of experience in the classroom, but also in the courtroom. He has worked widely in the space of law and sexual reproductive health. Professor Ben, thank you so much for accepting to come to this podcast.
Thank you very much.
Let's first start off. I've discussed with many of your colleagues and students, and they call you Professor Shokoro. Maybe we can start on that light note.
No, Shokoro is a nickname which I acquired in primary 3.
Oh.
There used to be a book where a major protagonist was Shokoro Bangoshe.
Mm-hmm.
During our reading exercise, I used to read very well and imitating his actions. So I acquired that name.
Shokoro.
And it has stuck. Before I closed my law firm in 2017, my law firm was called Trinomcha Shokoro and Company Advocates.
Really?
I did that because I knew people who knew me would look for Shokoro. And students have taken it even to another level by calling me Shoki.
But Professor Ben, thank you. Professor Ben has trained some of the country's top lawyers and judges, and he's a proud teacher. 38 years doing law and teaching law at school. Quite a celebrated person that we have today in the studios. But Prof, let's start with, I just wanted to tap into your knowledge and wealth of experience around the subject of sexual reproductive health and rights. Sexuality in Africa was largely seen as sacred. And but you know, as we open up to the global village, so many things are coming up. You know, Uganda just passed, for example, the anti-homosexuality law that has caused us problems, and to a large extent, people think that is against human rights. And we have our own issues as a continent. We have widespread teenage pregnancy. We have access to contraceptives, which has a lot of issues. The subject of sexual reproductive health continues to be the headline in Uganda, but also in Africa at large. Let me first of all ask you, what do you make of the critical issues that we face as a continent in terms of sexual reproductive health?
Thank you, Solomon, and listeners. I think the subject of sexual and reproductive health and rights is broad. And the challenge is that we do not inquire into what even used to happen during the pre-colonial times, before colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to jump to these instruments of Cairo Program of Action, Beijing, etc. But we don't interrogate what was there before colonialism itself. And I just want to make one first observation that whether it is sexual or reproductive health, rights, or justice, the African conceptualization of sexual and reproductive health and rights is different a bit different from how we see it now.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you read John Mbiti's African Regions and Philosophy, and some other publications of his, on how he looks at sexuality, how Africans in a number of ethnic groupings looked at sexuality, is quite a bit different from how we view it. Why do I would say this? And I will take the example of my people, the Bachiga. Sexuality was largely viewed from the point of view of procreation.
Mm-hmm.
Procreation in the sense that continuity of life was critical to not only individuals but the whole community.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the Ubuntu philosophy, Ubuntu,
Mm-hmm.
Ubuntu Bulamu, etc. And the gist of that was the I am because we are,
Mm-hmm.
because you are, therefore I am. Among the Wachiga, and I said I'm talking about my people, the Wachiga, if you died without leaving a child, you were frowned upon.
Mm.
Yes. If you died without marriage, you died single, whether a man or a woman, special rites had to be performed. Because if it was not done, your ghost would return with visions. They had to perform special rites because you have not left a child. Children were held in high esteem. A family with many children was respected. So marriage was a special institution, an institution or a vehicle through which humanity would be propagated. So within that arrangement, issues like abortion, though they could take place secretly, because I've talked to some elders about this, you could have abortion where, for example, someone came to work in Uganda, he's been there for 3 years, the woman has an extramarital affair, becomes pregnant, there would be maybe 1 or 2 women who secretly could use some herbs, including what they call mohoko, to terminate the pregnancy. But it was very rare and frowned upon. Very rare and frowned upon. Not carried out just because they wanted to simply, didn't want a child. But you can see that one was out of preservation of the marriage. Certain old man told me that. I've not seen it documented, but certain old man told me that. Of course, oral tradition and oral tradition. Secondly, because the institution of marriage was respected, premarital sex was frowned upon.
Wow.
If a girl became pregnant out of marriage in my area, she would be thrown
Over the cliffs.
a cliff. She falls. That obnoxious custom was ended when a girl who was taken there, supposed to be thrown there by a brother, pulled the brother down. She exercised her agency in a subversive fashion, and that custom ended.
So they both died.
I'm talking about agency because when you read anthropological works during that time, it seems as if these girls were helpless and helpless victims, passive, without any agency. But these girls had agency. She ended the custom by throwing this boy over the cliff in the falls, and the custom ended. Some other who would be pregnant would be taken to Lake Bunyonyi on an island. Okay? Left there.
Left there?
Yes. Then men who didn't have cows to pay bride price or bridal gifts would pick a wife from there. The point I'm trying to make is that marriage was exalted. Procreation was the norm. Much as sex, the act of sex, would come in form of pleasure, but largely it was procreation. So during that time, issues of homosexuality, again among my people, the Wachiga, homosexuality was frowned upon. Not that homosexuals were not recognized were not known that they are there, but they were not recognized. Because if a man has sex with a man, or a woman has sex with a woman, they are not going to give birth. And the essence of the Bachiga culture, and I believe a number of African ethnic groupings, procreation was the ethos. Procreation was the driving aspect of society, to see how society can increase. And it could not increase through homosexuality. And there was a word that was used in my area to describe homosexuals. Ebitingwa.
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 Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I know, like in my area, Ruchiga, there was a man who behaved like a woman. And with hindsight now I can see that was transgender. And there is a way they were handling what we can call the intersex now. There is a word they use, eshinyabibiri.
Eshinyabibiri?
Yes, someone who was born with both
sexual organs.
Yes. And that person was not mistreated to the level that chitingwa, the homosexual, would be handled. Okay? And that is now again the challenge when you group homosexuals, gays, lesbians with intersex. Okay? But that is the point I'm trying to look at here. So it is, to me, not entirely correct to simply move down into these issues of sexuality without going into the pre-colonial period to see exactly what took place. But of course, I'm acutely aware that pre-colonial relations varied from one society to the next. You could have certain areas maybe that were viewing it differently. But talking about for the Bachiga, homosexuality, abortion were frowned upon because they undermined the norm of procreation. A girl was supposed to keep herself pure until marriage. But of course, you can see the inequality there in terms of a girl keeping herself pure and the young man roaming the area like we used to do. And it was a duty of a brother to ensure that this girl does not meander around. If he found with another boy, would even beat the boy. So that is very important.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when colonialism came in, some laws which were applied in Victorian England found themselves within our own laws. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah. After independence, we inherited these laws.
So many of them.
Yes, so many of them. And that's why you find these offenses like homosexuality. It's not, by the way, homosexuality under the penal code. It's called the offenses
against the laws of nature.
Against the laws of nature. Okay? Which was in Victorian England. Again, as I've said, that one rhymed with what our people, even during colonialism and pre-colonial era, what our people, and I'm talking about the Bachiga here, what our people were seeing as good and acceptable behavior. So engaging in acts against the common knowledge of nature, including sodomy, was an African from the viewpoint of my people, the Bachiga. I have read other areas also.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those views I could see. So the penal code again came up with provisions on abortion. Section 141 to 143.
Again, it was the Victorian.
Yes. Influenced by the Christian approach in England. Okay. Section 141 to 143 of the penal code on abortion, procuring drugs for abortion, etc. Okay. It was there.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've said, in the pre-colonial era, abortion may have taken place, but it was not something exalted. because it undermined the value that was attached to children. Okay, so that was important. That was the view at that time, in my own understanding. So these penal code provisions came up with a window in our section 224 of the penal code, which permits a health worker, a qualified health worker, to perform a surgical procedure, perform a procedure on a woman, pregnant woman, for purposes of saving her life or the life of the unborn child. That section does not expressly permit abortion. It talks about a procedure. And that is understandable, saving the mother's life. And indeed, within pre-colonial times and even the colonial times, such a kind of procedure could be carried out to save the mother's life. I have read Professor Musisi's work quoting what the Church Mission Society found here, where we had obstetricians operating.
I had an honor of as well listening to Professor Segane Musi deliver a keynote speech on that.
Yes.
How we used to do open ovarian surgery and C-sections and
exactly. So I do believe that a woman could not be left to die just for purposes of saving the life of the fetus. So I think those ones rhymed together. I'm saying this because when we talk about Afrocentrism, we are talking about African solutions, African problems. And we are talking about putting, having a perspective that upholds African agency, where Africans become not just simply objects of analysis, but subjects of analysis.
Wow.
Where we learn from our own methods of work. And that's why I'm taking you back to
the pre-colonial time.
Okay. And one thing again we need to recognize as we discuss this issue of sexual and reproductive health and rights, which these days I call sexual and reproductive justice, because reproductive justice is broader. When we talk about these matters, we have to recognize the impact of Islam and Christianity on our own African customary practices and values.
That's very important, especially after the colonial. After the colonial.
Yes. For example, I'm here, a professor of law, a man,
a
Muchiga African man, and a staunch Christian. I cannot deny the fact that Christianity mediates the way I think, the way I act. You get my point?
Yes, sir.
What values, positive values, can I get from Christianity and marry them with the traditional aspects for purposes of enhancing sexual and reproductive justice? You get the point?
I do.
And this also applies to Islam. What can we learn from Islam? What can we learn from Christianity? What can we learn from the pre-colonial era? When we talk about pregnancy, for example, teenage pregnancy, which, as we know, has just dropped by 1 point from 25% to 24%, teenage pregnancy.
That's according to the latest UBOS report.
Yeah, UBOS report. Because our minds have, I'm sorry to use this, because you see, our minds have been so much dominated by Western perspectives of sexuality and reproductive justice. We don't pause to interrogate. We don't pause to interrogate some of the perspectives that are put forward. And to me, this is very, very critical. When we talk about teenage pregnancy, can girls become pregnant when they have not had sex?
No.
That's a truism. So why don't we borrow from the pre-colonial era, which I've talked about, and first emphasize purity and virginity among girls and boys. And among the boys, get them have a positive approach on how they are dealing with these girls and boys. So that you see, if the girls can keep themselves pure, these days I talk about virginity, and I even say secondary virginity. You can still say, I was a virgin. Okay.
Now I'm a virgin.
Just I'm no longer going to have sex until marriage, or until I finish school, or until
that is secondary virginity.
Yeah, until I am mature enough to decide on my own that I'm going to have a child. We are not saying that all girls must remain virgins, but we're saying provide these girls and boys with information. And that's what is lacking.
Mm-hmm.
The information that comes from Western outlets, including some of our NGOs, is that we don't bring this out. And to me, in the Afrocentric perspective, we need to talk about this issue of purity, issue of virginity, that our great-grandfathers and mothers were emphasizing. Then, those who cannot, after receiving that information, then can we have what we call age-appropriate access to certain health commodities, like condoms, contraceptives? You get my point?
Mm-hmm.
But after we have talked about that purity and virginity, among my people again, the Wachiga, if you got married, because marriage was taken as a serious institution, very serious institution, including the bridal gifts, what these colonial masters, through a judge called Hamilton in Ara versus Hamukeo, said that these bridal gifts and bridal exchanges of gifts were bride price, that's wife purchase. But among the Wachiga, and I believe across most ethnic groupings, if a girl got married, there was a process.
Mm-hmm.
Among the Wachiga, a girl would be tied with a rope. I don't say rope really, I should say kodomweko. Umweko is some cloth tied around the waist.
Mm.
I'm acutely aware that is now criticized, that because it was men would be promiscuous and the girls would not. But to me, I still believe, even now when I'm teaching, before I move quickly to condoms, contraceptives, etc., what we call safe sex, etc.,
virginity is core.
Virginity, purity. Because if a girl keeps herself pure until, I'm talking about until marriage, or until she's an adult and decides, you get my point? To have sex maybe for the purpose of having a child, etc., no problem. Okay? Otherwise, previously, I would simply delve into safe sex, etc., but there is that aspect of purity and virginity.
Some people have argued that is no longer possible.
No. I can tell you, Solomon, there are many, because I'm interacting with girls now in churches where I preach. I'm a freelance preacher. There are many girls and boys who vow to remain virgins. Of course, it's only God who knows their hearts. Okay? But a good number of girls and boys testify that they are still virgins. I think we need to...
So where did we lose it?
We need...
Before you can...
Just a moment. We need to go to the Afrocentric view of exalting the virtues of sex. We are not just other animals. We are not just these other animals on the loose. I even think animals also have mating season. And this is a message to me which our children need to get. Our girls and boys need to get. That you can still be there without sex. We need to teach our boys that when your penis erects, it does not mean it's a signal of having sex. You can always control yourself, like we do as married men.
Mm-hmm.
You can always control yourself. But this message of coming in the saying, no, it's no longer possible, people should have sex anywhere, anytime. I don't think it works.
But you see, while you're saying it can work, but the numbers are speaking differently. I mean, when you look at the numbers from UBOS, you just mentioned that teenage pregnancy has come to about 24%, just 1 percentage point below. And that number, that statistic is telling that young people are having sex.
Yes.
And therefore, and I know that they have been preached the message of virginity. The reverse is actually true, that they are having sex and therefore we need to protect them from unwanted pregnancy.
Absolutely. They are having sex.
Even when they have preached to them, because I believe their parents have told them you have to be a virgin.
Yes, but
I mean, we have talking compounds in schools.
When you talk about 24%, there is 76%. Where are you taking the 76%?
Maybe those have had sex, but they have used contraceptives.
Exactly, that's what I said. We talk about virginity, we talk about purity, until marriage or a time when you are ready. But we don't close the window. I said it here. You get my point? That's the starting point. But those who cannot take that route, and I emphasize it, you can have safe sex, for example, condoms, male or female condoms. You can talk about contraceptive, because we know about 98-99%. Only about 1% may be chance of becoming pregnant when a girl has used contraceptives in the indicated way. You get the point? But what I'm saying is that we should not simply jump into condoms and contraceptives. And Solomon, when you're talking to your children, at an appropriate time.
And that is where I was actually coming.
It's when you're talking to your children.
Talking to our children about sexual reproductive health is very core. In the past, in many of our African communities, we used to have the uncles and the aunties who used to speak to our children or to the daughters how to do what, how do you get ready for marriage, what do you experience at this time. Nazi kuno walingawo bakoja ne basenga. Right now, we as parents, one, are shy, very shy about talking with our children, but also are overly busy that we have forgotten our parental duties of actually giving information to these young people. Do you think that we need to go back to those Afrocentric ideologies that we used to have in the past that kept the sanctity of purity and marriage?
Well, yeah, we need to. The challenge is that, of course, like in Uganda here, the institution of the Senga or Koja was very instrumental. The challenge is that it has been commercialized. I have talked to a number of Sengas who really see, really that there is a challenge just only chasing money. But like in Uganda here, that one worked effectively, even because of the clan system, functioning clan system, which like in my people among the Wachiga, the clan system is not so strong. Back this point as parents, you have to talk to these children. I have talked to my grandchildren. I have 4 children, 3 girls are already married, and 1 boy hasn't got married. But people who have young children, for us with our grandchildren, granddaughters, and the grandsons, we need to talk to these children in an age, that's what we call now the age-appropriate, age and culturally appropriate comprehensive sexuality education. What do we mean by that? Look at the age, and that is very important. The message, Solomon, you give to a 14, 15-year-old girl or boy is not the message you give someone who is 10 years. And what do we do in these matters? We need to read. To me, people need to read, those who can manage, to read and find out how you can handle these children. I tell you, for example, among the 12, 13, or 11, 14-year-old girls, there is a challenge of menstruation. A number of them find themselves menstruating when they do not know what this is all about. I was conducting some sensitization.
Because no one told them.
Because no one told them. Okay? I was conducting a sensitization on behalf of IPAS one time in Arua. Okay? And the girl told us a story of how she was in class. She entered in her mess. She didn't know. She remained seated there. She remained seated there. And the teacher of mathematics came to her and said, you must answer this sum. And to answer the sum, you had to go to the blackboard and write there. But this girl remained stuck there. Now, someone who was older, the girl who was slightly older, went and talked to her. The girl said, I am bleeding. I don't know whether there is a nail that has hit me on this chair where the bench where I'm seated. So the girl walked to the teacher, said, I want to talk to you. Whispered to him. The teacher adjourned the class. Now they find that the girl was in that situation. Lucky enough, there was a girl who had a caress. They had to cover her. Okay? Another young man in that meeting, when he was talking about experiences of wet dreams, okay? And some of them were talking about the age of sexual birth, the first time they had sex. Now this boy said that on the bed, that when I had a wet dream, that it seemed like a helicopter. You know, those memories are still in my mind. You get my point?
Yes.
So what you are saying is correct. As parents, where singers, choirs are still functioning because they have been commercialized. And in some areas, some singers and even choirs don't even wish the other children well. I'm sorry to say that, but this is what we are living through. So I think parents need to get involved.
But also these days, like right now, we have the .com parents. Even if you're a singer and Kojan, they send you their daughters. I mean, I've had scenarios where, for example, we wanted to send our daughter to maybe an auntie. But these are the .coms, and they may not necessarily speak to these children. They may maybe fear or what. And so that very grounding in our culture system has since broken down in a way.
Yeah, it has broken down, but we should not forget that we can revive those values, combined, as I've said, with Islamic teachings, Christian teachings, or some other spiritual-based teachings. Because we must rescue this generation. This generation must know, and again, these are my views, they are not those of Ahaki or what, as the president has been emphasizing. I liked a post he had recently on alcoholism. Those are other challenges, for example. When we were growing up, drinking alcohol was a preserve for the elders. The young ones, we could drink alcohol after performing some work, and it is the elders who have given you.
Mm.
But you know what alcoholism is doing to our young generation, which has now extended to other difficult drugs. And as the president was saying on that post I saw, where people have become inspectors of private parts. To me, we need to reinvigorate that view. We need to resuscitate that view that sex must be given the value
it deserves. It deserves. Thank you very much. And, and the very core of our community. When we were growing up, we used to have in Luganda that omwana takozibwomu.
Exactly.
A child is brought up by a community, not just their parents. And community members would be on the lookout. They'd be concerned, why is your son doing that? Why? I mean, those values and systems that used to hold us together as a people, as a community, have since broken. And in many societies, it doesn't exist anymore.
Yes, but you see, that said, it doesn't mean that if, for example, a girl becomes pregnant, that now you go back to the pre-colonial era, you have a duty to support that girl. Abortion, as I said, was reserved for those circumstances like where it could destroy marriage if, for example, a woman engaged in an extramarital affair. And indeed, see, in the area of abortion, in Uganda, as I've said, it is allowed only for preservation of the mother's
life.
So parents, when a girl becomes pregnant, that's not the end of her life. If she wants to carry the pregnancy to term, let her carry it and she goes back to school. And there you must thank the First Lady, the Minister of Education, the intervention they put in. Remember during COVID?
After even giving birth, you can still go back to school.
So that even after giving birth, a child can go to school and the child should be supported.
Let's shift gears and I take you into your terrain, Professor Ben. How would you describe our legal and policy framework in as regards
No,
to sexual reproductive health and rights?
Solomon, before we go there, you see,
Mhm.
I want us to know that we now view this, at least personally, I view this issue, especially when we go to reproductive health in terms of reproductive justice. You know, at Cairo in 1994, when the International Conference on Population Development came up with the Cairo Program of Action, where they placed women at the center of development policies.
Nothing without us for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they emphasized reproductive rights, body integrity, etc., etc. There is a group of women that came up, women of color, some Afro-American women, came up and said, so many people are focusing on abortion. They are focusing on the pro-choice, the pro-life debates. But we Afro-Americans, and even on behalf of these other women, for example, from the third world, like in Africa here, because like you see, when we talk about an African woman in the third world here, she may be a victim of gender inequality, but there are other variables in what we call intersectionality, other variables, class, disability, HIV, etc., that may come up to describe this woman. So you may have a poor woman here and you have a poor woman in Europe. Both are women, but they suffer marginalization differently. And to me, that's very important. So these women came up and said, let's have what we call reproductive justice. And in three important components: the right to have a child, the right not to have a child, and the right to have a child in safe and healthy environments. I know, Solomon, your head is now full of reproductive rights and many others I deal with, including in Ahaki. But I want you to look at this poor African girl from Namutumba, Kabera Maido, from Ruchiga, where I come from, rural area there. This African poor girl, whose parents cannot afford her tuition in senior 2, she has dropped out. She's the one fetching firewood, she's the one fetching water, she's the one cleaning the compound, the one digging, every type of work. And this girl gets a boy who says, a border boy who says, I'm giving you 5,000 shillings. So this girl, she's a girl, she has dropped out of school, she's poor. And we are talking about that girl in comparison with the girl at Kampala Parent School who wakes up and the fridge is open, the food is on the table, she's dropped at school. We must view these girls and women differently. And that's why I am now a champion of reproductive justice, but without focusing on abortion as such, so that we go broadly. For example, we have a problem of cancer, what I call the cancer trajectory. But go to reproductive justice, sexual reproductive health and rights, very few advocates and activists and even academics are talking about that. And it's a reproductive issue, health issue. Among the men, for example, we have testicular cancer, penile cancer, breast cancer. Among the women, breast cancer, we have cervical cancer, etc. These are reproductive justice issues. So the question of access, cost of screening for these cancers is a serious problem. Okay? So the right to have a child in safe and healthy environment. A hut where this woman is staying and going to deliver. She has labor in the garden. She has not even washed her legs. She does not even have knickers. She goes to a nearby health center. The healthcare workers are abusing the question of attitude of health workers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so to me, we have to go to those issues in a deeper fashion. beyond the language of the so-called access to safe legal abortion. That's just a simple thing, small thing.
Into the broader conversation around reproductive justice.
Yes, broader conversation around reproductive justice, the right to have a child. Let this woman, who is a Catholic, a pious Catholic, does not want to use contraceptives, her right must be respected.
But you see,
Let this other
that
woman,
is where I
let
don't
thi-
understand
let
that.
This other woman who wants to use contraceptives, use them.
That's why I don't understand you, Professor Ben, because if you're saying that we stick to the aspect that sex is supposed to be for procreation, and a Catholic woman wants to have sex for pleasure, but they're not allowed to use condoms, and they don't want to get pregnant, but they just want to have sex for pleasure, not for procreation.
You have misunderstood me. You have misunderstood me, Sarah Solomon. I have not said that sex is only for procreation. I said sex was viewed for procreation.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the Catholic Church, for example,
yes.
that doesn't allow couples to use condoms.
Just a moment. Human rights, as we know, human rights requires that people should be free. What that woman, once you explain to her about contraceptives, etc., and she says, me, I don't want, I want to continue using my traditional natural methods of family planning, and I get time, by the way, on Google. There's now a movement even in the West for people to embrace natural family planning methods. If that person wants to use those methods and does not want to use our modern contraceptive techniques, respect her choice. If another woman or girl, after information is given to her, the productive health information, she wants to use the contraceptives, so be it. That's the point I'm making. And I think that's why you misunderstood me. The challenge I'm saying is, for us, we go to these women and say, like a drop of manna, contraceptives are here. No. Let there be informed consent. Let's have this data. Give it to this woman or man or boy or girl, and let them be able to move on. A question of choice, as you are talking about. Even when we talk about, for example, the issue of abortion. I participated in the development of these guidelines, which were shelved by the Minister of Health.
When on the day she was supposed to pass them.
You get the point? And in those guidelines, we had a heated debate. People didn't want to hear about anything beyond so-called safe abortion. I said no. If a woman has been raped, or a girl has been defied or subjected to sexual violence as it were, but she wants to carry a child. I mean, she doesn't want to carry a child, but she does not want to terminate a pregnancy. Let's create a system of foster care, adoption. That was my insistence.
She carries the pregnancy to full term?
Yes. Then if she does not want to carry the child, because you see, we know the emotional trauma associated with carrying that child when a woman does not want, then you can have the child adopted or into foster care. And which I am happy, even some countries are now following it up. Mm-hmm. So that is my view, really, as it were. And even within our own societies, among the Bachiga, for example, a child born out of wedlock or a child born out of marriage was called a Chinyandaro. But that child was not killed.
A Chinyandaro.
Yeah, that child could be taken, for example, to an aunt, get my point, to stay there. Yeah. Remember, we're talking about Afrocentric.
Interesting. Professor, thank you. Just to tap into your wealth of experience in terms of our legal and policy framework, many of the laws that you had mentioned were the Victorian laws. Is there a need to amend some of these laws to fit the current situation?
No amendments have been taking place. I'll give you an example, and that's what we've been struggling for in our litigation advocacy. Mm-hmm. For example, following Petition 16, Sehad and others versus Attorney General, where we're challenging government for non-provision of maternal health care commodities, and the Constitutional Court found in our favor. And part of the provisions that we relied upon were Objective 20 and Objective 14 of our Constitution, about provision of medical services and access to health services in light of the state obligations. But in the recent amendment of the Public Health Amendment Act, those two provisions have been incorporated by Parliament in that act. Again, in that in the petition, we invoked Article 33 of the Constitution on Women's Rights, and those provisions have been incorporated in the amendment. There are efforts, for example, of East African Community Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights Bill, which has positive aspects and, of course, some negative aspects. And that's why it's even not yet endorsed by everybody. But certain aspects can be picked up and even included in our laws. So we need, as they talk about this Constitutional Review Commission, review exercise, we need an explicit provision on the right to health.
The right to health provision. Okay.
Secondly, an explicit provision on well-defined aspects of sexual and reproductive rights. I'm talking about well-defined because we have experiences, you see, like in Kenya, the 2010 Constitution. They talk about life beginning at conception. But there are instances where a woman can terminate a pregnancy on certain grounds. But all those must be put in the law. For example, expanding on our Article 22 of the Constitution. Let me just make this very clearly. One, issues of sexual and reproductive justice are very legitimate in this country. They can be handled in many ways, including through legal and policy framework. We need to learn, in my view, from the pre-colonial setting. How did our forefathers and mothers handle issues of sexuality and reproduction? What lessons, especially the positive ones, can we learn from there? Next, how can we combine aspects from our African values and traditions with aspects from the universality view of human rights, the current view of human rights? Because our own constitution itself recognizes the right to culture, but only those positive cultural values and practices that enhance the dignity, for example, of a woman or a girl. A country without a culture, a people without a culture is dead. The Westerners who formulated these human rights instruments we sing about have their own cultures.
That is true.
We must go back to our own African traditional values and say, what can we accommodate and what can we discard? In our own values, there are those who can discard, there are those who can uphold. In the Western values, including the regions they introduced, what positive aspects can we adopt and what can we discard? Finally, the question of sexual and reproductive health for the young people must be handled by all stakeholders, including the parents, the family, the community, where people, for example, have functioning clans, although they are breaking down, like I saw where clan members of the Ndiga kill a head, allegedly kill the head of the Ndiga, which wouldn't. Killing a clan member, your clanmate, was itself unheard of. Okay, so we need to combine those. I have put this on paper, so we need to learn from both sides and broaden the conceptualization and outlook of reproductive justice to even ask the harder questions that interrogate the systemic and structural causes of these sexual reproductive health challenges.
Wow. Quite a good way to wrap it up. And thank you very much, Professor Ben. Thank you, Professor Ben Trimugisha is Professor of Laws at Makerere University. They are sharing deeply his heartfelt thoughts around sexual reproductive health, and then and giving his views as a parent, as a grandfather. Quite very interesting views he has shared with us today. I hope you really loved this conversation on reproductive justice. I'm Solomon Serwanja. Professor, thank you so much for making time for us.
Thank you very much, Solomon.
Yeah. All right. This is the Ahaki podcast.